Rockstar is the best when it comes to creating AAA games. Rockstar is the best when it comes to creating
single-player
AAA games. It almost feels weird nowadays when games like Suicide Squad, Killed Justice League, or Starfield are referred to as AAA. And don't even get me started on Ubisoft daring to call something like Skull and Bones a quadruple A game. Meanwhile, you have a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, also referred to as AAA. It's like if your friend brought a paper airplane to a jet show and goes, "Yeah, I'm a pilot just like these guys." Now what exactly defines something as AAA? Well, Webster's dictionary defines AAA as nothing. It's not in the dictionary. So everyone who's about to type "actually" in the comments, just know you're wrong. AAA is usually defined by the size of the team that made a video game. And I guess back in the ancient days of the early 2000s, this worked. Because back then, gaming was much more niche, meaning most people in the industry actually gave a shit. So the more people on the team, the better. However, that's certainly not the case anymore. If anything, it feels like the bigger the studio, the worse the game. Unless we're talking about Rockstar. For some reason, and please God, don't let this video age terribly, for some reason, these guys have been putting out hit after hit. GTA, Max Payne, Bully, Red Dead Redemption, even the hit game Evel Knievel on the Game Boy Color. Now that's not to say Rockstar doesn't have any games with issues, but, I just want to pretend those don't exist and then deal with the consequences later. Either way, this video is supposed to really just be about Rockstar's best game and what I believe the new standard for AAA is supposed to be. However, Nintendo will 100% sue me if I show more than 5 seconds of that Evel Knievel game, so I guess I'll have to go with the second best game. Alright, let's get the more obvious thing out of the way first. Story. Now I'll tell you guys straight up front, I might be a bit biased because I honestly think Red Dead 2's story is one of the best in gaming ever. Is it my favorite? No. But I can definitely see the argument for it to be objectively considered the best. But why? What makes Rockstar so good at crafting their stories? Well, let's take a look at a scene from Red Dead Redemption 2.
Here, take this. I don't need it no more.
I don't want your money.
Yeah, I know you don't want it.
I don't.
You sure as shit need it. Take it.
No.
I ain't looking for forgiveness. It ain't about that. But don't forgive me. Just take the money and get out of here, please. I know I ruined your life. I suffer for it every day. But don't let yourself get killed for pride. I seen it kill too many folk. Don't say anything. Don't thank me. Just take the money and pack your bags. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
I said don't thank me. Get out of here. Please.
Okay, now let's take a look at a random competitor's attempt at story.
You know, as far as hired killers go, I'd give him a 7.
You look like you could use a mukmosa.
Thanks, Eli. Seriously, how's the job? It's the murder business. The fundamentals don't change, just the uniform.
I can tell you love it.
Okay. I don't have to love it, I have to pay my student loans. I'm in.
I feel like I don't need to explain anything further, but I'll do it anyway real quick. Simply put, Rockstar is good at making stories because they understand people. Lord of the Rings, Into the Spider-Verse, Halo, The Last of Us 1, Uncharted. These stories aren't really good because of the action or the setting they take place in. It's the characters that make or break it. How they act, react, interact with the world and the plot around them. And don't get me wrong, these two things can help because it's a lot easier to write characters around a fantastical setting and plot rather than having two characters just talking in a blank room. But if you don't get characters right, then this is like putting whipped cream and sprinkles on a rock. It's never gonna look appealing. And this is what Rockstar does right. They understand how to make good and compelling characters. So many games end up either falling back on cliches and making nearly every character a one-dimensional archetype, or they create characters that are 100% perfect in everything they do, have no flaws whatsoever, and as such also means they don't have any arc whatsoever, which leads to the most boring personality ever. It just feels like studios are trying to play things safe, take the easy way out, when in reality, this is what ends up holding their games back from being something great. Because listen, you could say that maybe stories shouldn't matter as much in video games. The main focus should be gameplay, graphics, etc., right? No. Good graphics may have been impressive like 15 years ago when video games were still a relatively niche thing, but these days with the current technology and tools developers have, it's not as difficult anymore. Things like Unreal Engine 5 make it so that indie studios can have games that look just as good, if not better than some of the AAA ones. And of course, gameplay is important, but like I said, this is AAA we're talking about. This is supposed to be what justifies having so many people working at these big studios. The reason why there's so much money going into these games. You shouldn't have to compromise on one aspect of the game you're making. I said earlier that Red Dead 2's story could objectively be considered one of the best, but I'm sure there's some of you that probably disagree with that. There are other great stories out there in gaming, some really amazing ones from even small indie studios. But what separates Red Dead from these other stories is that it also backs it up with amazing gameplay, a breathtaking open world, and so many little details and features that you just wouldn't find from a smaller studio. That's what AAA is, or what it should be. Of course, there will be those that argue, I don't care about story in video games. All I really want is fun gameplay. And yeah, that's not always there either. You know, you would think that the less effort a story has put into it, the better the gameplay would be. Because obviously that's the only other place where the time and resources a studio has would go then. Right? Right? I know correlation doesn't equal causation, but it does seem interesting that so many games with bad stories also tend to have bad or boring gameplay. I think it's because, just like with stories, studios focus on what's safe rather than trying to innovate. I know I've kind of picked on Bethesda for a few videos now, but I'm gonna do it again. I remember when Starfield initially launched, one of the main criticisms I heard often was that this game would be considered impressive back in 2011. And I think that statement actually sums up how I feel about a lot of AAA titles nowadays. It feels like studios that are desperately trying to hold on to what made them big in the first place. They're trying to relive their glory days. Take Ubisoft, for example. They made Assassin's Creed, and one feature that many players liked in older titles such as 3 and Black Flag was the ship mechanic. So they used it over and over and over to the point where it just feels boring now. And this creates a problem. Because studios play it safe, constantly reuse mechanics from several years past, anytime they try something new, it either ends up failing or feeling shallow. Maybe it's because they just don't know how to innovate, or maybe because studios just don't want to take the risk and budget out the proper resources to explore innovation. But whatever the case, it ends up hurting their game all the same. Rockstar is still one of the few big studios that understands that what you did yesterday is not as important as what you do tomorrow. Well, they mostly understand that. They made things like San Andreas and the first Red Dead Redemption. And while elements from those games still exist in their newer titles, you can see the clear innovation that they've explored and executed. Red Dead Redemption 2 could have easily just been the same as the first. They could have slapped together a few western-looking towns, some mountains, and a forest with a dude riding a horse. But they went the extra mile. You have things like detailed NPCs who have actual schedules and unique responses based on your character's specific actions. Having your guns not just teleporting inside your character, but actually showing them holstered at your side or on your back. Having the gang at camp be so realistic that you could swear they would still exist and go about their day even if you turned the game off. Alright, maybe I'm glazing just a bit. But my point is that Rockstar is still trying when it comes to games, whereas so many other big players in the industry would rather have you focus on how good the graphics look. This way they can end up releasing more games in a shorter amount of time. It's why games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 6 are in development for so long, because innovation and actual good game design takes so long to make. When you get down to it, AAA doesn't actually mean anything. It's just another buzzword that studios throw around to make their game sound good. And if you're really desperate, you say quadruple A. Really, what most of these games truly actually feel like are corporate games. This is a corporate game. This is a corporate game. This is a corporate game. And even this is a corporate game. If you really want the honest truth about why Rockstar is still putting out amazing games, it's because they hire people who give a shit and are good at what they do, just like back in the old days. I'm not gonna say Rockstar has never failed, because they have, at least twice. But the reason I'm not as nervous for GTA 6 compared to some other AAA game is because for the most part, Rockstar's track record speaks for itself. Red Dead Redemption 2 was a masterpiece in my mind, and I know so many others share that same sentiment. If we're lucky, GTA 6 could be even better. But either way, at the moment, when I think of the gold standard for AAA games, I can't think of anything better than this game.